Chaim. Hope you're having a great day. So I don't know if you've been paying attention, but President Biden has been in the Holy Land of Israel, and it's been a pretty remarkable trip. He spoke at the airport, and he's been at Yad Vashem, and then he met with the Prime Minister, but there was a special ceremony that he had at the residence of the President of Israel, President Isaac Herzog, where he got the Medal of Freedom, the highest medal that Israel ever bestows on anyone, and the President said it was one of the greatest days of his life. And the President spoke. He's been in Israel 10 times, and he spoke very movingly about the bone-deep relationship of Israel and the United States. Then he did something interesting. He quoted from this week's Torah portion, and he quoted from the prophecy of Bilam, the famous prophet Bilam, who wanted to curse the Jewish people. The Moabites and the Midianites brought him to curse the Jewish people, and yet he ends up blessing them. And President Biden today, before he got the Medal of Freedom from President Herzog, quoted from Bilam's prophecy, where Bilam says, "I see him from the top of the mountains, from the hills, I am able to view him." And then he said, "A nation that dwells alone, Hein am levadad yishayin, a nation that dwells alone, about goyim lo yischashav, and is not reckoned by the nations." And President Biden said, "I look at you people out here who've made a desert bloom, who've invented Iron Dome, and I say you will never dwell alone again, because as long as the United States of America is here, you will never be alone." Those are moving words. Whichever way you take them, and whichever way you stand in politics, it's very moving. But I want to tell you something very interesting. First of all, is that bad? Is that good? Is that correct? Well, I want to tell you a story. Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, one of the most decorated Israeli soldiers, generals, very involved in the Six-Day War. And then in 1968, he retired from the army. And as a civilian, his first foray into politics was at the age of 40. He became the American ambassador to the United States. Never been in politics before. In 1972, President Shazar, who's the president of Israel, reaches out as ambassador in the United States, and he says, "I want you to go, it's March, I want you to go to Brooklyn, and on behalf of the state of Israel, and on behalf of me personally, I want you to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and wish him greetings and blessings upon his 70th birthday." Yitzhak Rabin grew up in an Israeli home, but there wasn't much Judaism. He's never been hanging out with religious Jews, definitely not with Chassidim. But he does what he's told. He comes late at night to meet the Rebbe, but he's waiting, because before him was President Nixon's representative, the famous writer Herman Wouk. He waits, and finally he gets his turn, and he comes into the Rebbe, someone who's never been around Chassidim, and he ends up spending 45 minutes with the Rebbe, and they discuss an array of deep ideas and thoughts about Israel, about the United States. And then the Rebbe turns to the Rabbi and he says, "Tell me, do you ever feel lonely as one of 120 representatives in the United Nations?" And President Rabin says, "No, listen, half of the representatives of the UN don't recognize us. I don't have to deal with them. And the other half, they respect us, and it's very nice." But the Rebbe says, "Yeah, but at the end of the day, America listens to them, and they have influence. Do you feel lonely?" And he says, "No." And suddenly the Rebbe pivots to theology. Now, anyone that knows Yitzhak Rabin, he wasn't a theologist. He wasn't a Ben Gurion. He wasn't someone of that kind. But the Rebbe turns to him and says, 3,300 years ago, the Rebbe tells Rabin, this is 1972. He says, the prophet Bilam said, "A nation that dwells alone. And the Rebbe looks at Rabin and he asks him, he says, "Tell me, is that good or is that bad?" He says, "What do you mean? It's negative." And the Rebbe looks at Rabin and he says, "No." He says, "Think about it. 2,000 years we've been in exile. We've been persecuted. We've had no home. We've always thought about Jerusalem and Israel. Why? because we're a nation that dwells alone. We're a nation that knows that we have a mission. Our aloneness comes from our uniqueness, from knowing that we have a mission like no other, and we represent God in this world. And that aloneness, a nation that dwells alone, that prophet Bilam said wasn't a curse, it was a blessing. He was blessing the Jewish people, recognizing their uniqueness in the world and their mission, and them always embracing it and always standing true by who and what they are. Yes, we also stand alone, the Rebbe says, in a negative way, that the world doesn't recognize us, that the world always looks at us in a down way, but we have to see it in a positive way, because Bilam was really saying what our true blessing is. 1974, Rabin comes back to Israel. Golda Meir resigns after this Yom Kippur War, and he becomes prime minister. In 1974, the Lubavitcher Rebbe decides to send emissaries, 20 emissaries to the land of Israel to help develop the land, 10 to Tzfat and 10 to Jerusalem. The day after they come to meet Rabin, and in fact, they give Rabin a check from the Rebbe. This is in 1974 of $10,000 for personal use to help develop the land. And Rabbi Mentlik, one of the Rebbe's emissaries, tells Rabin, don't forget what the Rebbe told him. Remember what the Rebbe told you about a nation that dwells alone. I always wondered, what was the Rebbe trying to say? But fast forward, 1993, on the lawn of the Oval Office of the White House, President Clinton with Yasser Arafat and Prime Minister Rabin, and they're about to sign the Oslo Accord. And Rabin says that 3,000 years ago, a prophet said, Hein am levadad yishkon, a nation that dwells alone, but now it's no more a nation that dwells alone. Now we're recognized by our neighbors, by Arafat, by the Palestinians. And I think that's what the Rebbe was trying to explain to Rabin. The Rebbe was trying to explain to Rabin back then, never fool yourself. Never should a Jew think that someone's going to recognize us and we're not going to dwell alone. Because at the end of the day, we look what's happening in the United States. We look at anti-Semitism rearing its ugly head. And sometimes we hope, we say, maybe if we give this up, if we give this away, if we give another piece of land, if we give away Gaza, if we give away the West Bank, if we give away Jerusalem, if we do what this one says, then maybe Ben and Jerry's won't boycott us, then maybe people will love us. What the Rebbe was trying to tell Rabin was, don't fool yourself. What Bilam said 300 years ago, that Hein am levadad yishkon, a nation that dwells alone will remain forever, with its negative connotations, but also with its blessing. Because dwelling alone means our uniqueness of who we are. A mamlechas koyanim, a nation of kings, a nation that brings light, that has morale, that has a purpose in the world of what it wants to bring. So the truth is, President Biden said something very moving, and he tried to say something positive. He said, you will never be a nation that dwells alone as long as America's with you. But as Jews, we always recognize that America notwithstanding, and all those that love us, it's the Christian evangelicals, if it's the United States of America, if it's some in Europe, if it's friends of Israel, that at the end of the day, as Bilam said 3,300 years ago, Hein am levadad yishkon, we will always dwell alone. It has negative connotations, and we will never be accepted, and we will never be recognized the way we should. And when it's positive connotations, that uniqueness of who we are and what we represent and what we bring to the world is what keeps us alive and what's given us survival over thousands of years. God bless you, and have a great day.